So the third and final test is now over between Wales and South Africa. We finally have a winner for their decider, and this one goes to South Africa in a game I sort of went the exact way I thought it was going to go. My prediction in the preview video we did for this was South Africa to win by 12. They ended up winning by 16, but it did go through some interesting fluctuations in how the game was going. I really thought South Africa were going to be in charge for a lot of the game, and actually Wales did much better than I expected. So as we've done for the other match reports, we've already done the All Blacks versus Ireland game and the Wallabies versus England, so feel free to go check them out after this video, and feel free to drop down in your comments your thoughts on this game, just so that I can go through and have a bit of a look what everyone thought of it. So as we've done in the other ones, we'll have a run through of the first half, go over some thoughts about how the first half went, and then have a look at the second half, go through all the highlights, the scores, and all that fun stuff. So starting off in the first half, this game had some big calls before we even got into it. Wales had a couple of injuries going into this game, which came out of the blue for me. Anscombe went out with a rib injury, so Patchell came in to replace. I don't even think we saw Patchell come onto the field, actually, now that I think about it. Faletau also went out just before kickoff, so Navidi stepping in at number 8. That's two big blows for Wales. We know how much Anscombe improved on that game last week and arguably helped them basically win that game. And Faletau, such a big ball carrier, dropping out. Navidi moving into 8, where normally you typically see Navidi playing in a flanker position. Has played 8 before, actually, in a couple of games, but typically you see him in a flanker position, so a bit of a loss there for Wales. There was also some quite interesting celebrations going into this game. Eben Etzebeth getting his 100th cap, that's a lot of fun. Bongi Mbanambi, hopefully I'm pronouncing his name right, onto his 50 caps now. And George North onto 105 caps, so now the highest capped back in Wales of all time. So lots of big news, and watching this game, it felt like I was actually watching it in South Africa. It is so warm here, as you can see, probably by the amount of sun. We are in heatwave central in the UK at the minute. I am extremely warm today. So starting off in this first half then, it got off to exactly what I expected. South Africa pretty dominant, realistically, going through my notes here. We've got 15 minutes. We've got 15 minutes of South Africa just looking extremely dominant. The first point's coming in the 3rd minute from Andre Pollard's boot. We actually thought it could have been more. Mapimpi went over for a try, and very nicely well worked try. South Africa moving it, spreading it wide. The grubber kick through from Lekanya Am, and watching Mapimpi go down and dot the ball down. Did think it looked like a try. We went back to the TMO, but he put his foot out in touch, so they had the try disallowed, but they went back for the penalty, so that's how we got the 3. Penalties began to plague Wales a lot in this first 15 minutes. There were 6 penalties in total within the first 15. That's a big penalty count. We expect 10 by the end of the game in an international level on average, so 6 in the first 15 minutes is an awful lot. The next South Africa attack basically began with a lovely up and under from Andre Pollard, being chased down by Valemsa, managed to catch the ball in the end against Dan Biggar, who's also good in an aerial battle, but managed to get under there. Dan Biggar did tackle him, but then held onto him while he tried to run away after letting the ball go and carrying onto a penalty. Went against Dan Biggar. They went to the corner and there was a driving maul. Didn't go how South Africa wanted. The driving maul began to come in the game a bit later, but actually Wales held out the driving maul pretty well in this game. Eventually we led to some scrums. Now scrummaging is where South Africa still looked dominant in this first half. They managed to win an advantage, and then they went on to do some plays, but Wales defence holding out on the line. But again, all these advantages coming from scrums, always going to be really difficult to deal with. They went back for another scrum. They got another penalty. We went back for another scrum. They got another advantage. And then eventually Hendrickse went for a tap and go, which I thought was an incredible call. I definitely thought there was a yellow card coming for Wales in the first 15 minutes because they just couldn't handle in those scrums. The tap and go didn't really lead to anything, looking very dangerous until about 5 phases later, where the ball finally pops out to Andre Pollard, who manages to carve in between 2 Wales players and gets himself over for a try and then converts his own kick. So South Africa are 10-0 up 15 minutes in. Wales weren't to be deterred by this. They got their own try back 5 minutes later, coming in from Tommy Raffel. This break actually all began way back with George North making a fantastic little break down the wing, considering he's playing centre. He spent a lot of time on the wing today. Fantastic ground made up. Someone did manage to get a nice little tackle on him. The attack was quite loose. It was a bit scrappy. No one seemed to have a great deal of direction, but the bobbling ball and over-the-shoulder passes eventually managing to work its way around, getting towards the line. Josh Adams taking it right to the corner. A superb tackle stops him from scoring himself, but he manages to get the offload for Tommy Raffel to go over. And to be honest, the way the attack was built, the way the Wales stretched it wide, I genuinely think this might have been Wales' best attack in the series so far. I've been saying for so long how they need to play wider, they need to engage these backs. They're making room. Why aren't they using them? In this game, we actually got to see it. So Tommy Raffel did get in. Unfortunately, the kick, pretty difficult for Dan Biggar, did end up missing that one. Wales continue to have a few more penalties going their way. Another penalty at the scrum, which they then kicked up the field. They went to the driving maul. Dylan Lewis then went in at the side of the maul and gave another penalty. They went for the kick. They got into the Wales 22, but Wales again managed to cope with the driving maul, looking very good in this first half, and then managed to do a nice clean exit. Wales then swapped, went back on the attack, had a nice sort of 5-6 minutes of full flow attacking rugby, trying to use their kicks. They was really nicely paced. They weren't trying to be desperate for scoring. They were just keeping South Africa stuck in their 22. If the ball was coming out, they'd chip it back in, kick it back to that 5-metre line, really pinning South Africa back, making them play out or making them kick the ball back to it. It was really nicely weighted, really nice the way they were doing it. Eventually, Wales did get a penalty. Pieter Steph du Toit pushing the jumper in the charge down. It was a bit of a lax penalty, but that's you just can't do it. You just can't put your arms out. We did see South Africa make an immediate change though after that penalty was given to a lot of players either standing with like their arms crossed or by their side. Really nice to see that South Africa adapting to those sorts of rules. We need to see more of that in rugby. When a referee gives a penalty just to actually stop it, we see it far too much. The referee gives a penalty and they just keep doing it. It's nice to see there. Dan Biggar did manage to kick this one, so it brought Wales back to 10-8. They just a little bit behind South Africa there. South Africa managed to recover the ball from the kickoff. The backs doing a fantastic kick chase. Really nice to see. Went through some phase plays, managing to make some good ground. Wales did eventually manage to get the ball back, and then South Africa with a huge counter-ruck back over the top. Really nice to see. Really putting Wales under huge pressure. Eventually led to another South Africa penalty. Wales offside. And now, an interesting point here that they decided to go for the corner. Now, they're only 2 points ahead. There's only a few minutes left in the game. A lot of teams would just take the 3 here. South Africa wanted to make the most of this opportunity. Kicked to the corner, went for that huge driving maul, and it finally pays off for them. And we get to see Bongi Mbonambi get over on his 50th cap for a try, and it was also converted. So South Africa went up 17-8 just before the end of the half-time whistle. Wales did try and commit their own attack afterwards, but Quagga Smith had come on by this point and just stripped the ball off basically anyone that had it in their hands. Looking really good. Managed to rip the ball. Lekanya Am did actually run it back up the pitch, had a little kick on, looked like it was potentially going to go back in there, but eventually pushed it back out, goes over the line. Wales take the line out in their own 22, and of course they just remove that from the field. So we go into half-time, still with that 17-8 lead to South Africa. Now, South Africa looked pretty good for a majority of this half. They looked in control. They've had a try disallowed, so they could have even scored more points. It looked like they were playing pretty well. In terms of notes at half-time, I wrote that Wales are looking so much better in attack, a lot less kicking. I haven't really mentioned that yet. Not as many box kicks as we've seen in the last 2 tests where you're just sort of handing the ball back. Wales actually held on to possession, utilised those backs a bit more, which is something I've been asking for all series. I underline that one. Penalty still an issue. 9 penalties in the first half to Wales. It's still less than their 6 in the first 15 minutes, but 9 in one half is an awful lot of penalties. That's what you see South Africa beginning to stretch that lead out. You just can't afford to be giving a team like South Africa so many penalty opportunities. From a South Africa perspective, they're only exiting using box kicks, which is something that was beginning to get a little bit jittery for me. They weren't really trying to play out. They weren't letting someone else hit the kicks. They were always resorting to these box kicks, which was really not allowing them to do anything. They were only making sort of 10, 20 metres up the field, and then it was a Wales line out, and Wales would take them all the way back to where the box kick was happening. Didn't seem like they had a great deal of exit strategy, so that was something I was going to be looking for in the second half. And then finally, one of the main points where South Africa are making ground in this game is utilising the backs. We saw a couple of their wingers making really good ground. Cheslin Colby before going off, and then Lekanya Am had to move to the wing. He was making good ground. Mapimpi on the wings, using their backs to make the ground and then using the forwards to actually generate points. So that's what we want to see a bit more from South Africa going into the second half. Moving on then to the second half, and it wasn't that long until we got to see the first points of this half. Dan Biggar getting a penalty from Pieter Steph du Toit, again not rolling away. A couple of penalties going against him today for such a good ball carry. There was an awful lot of penalties against him at the breakdown. It'd be something he'll want to improve for future games. South Africa did hit back. They had another try disallowed. This one coming from Lacania Am. South Africa from the back of a line-out popped it off to Quagga Smith, who made a huge break into some Wales tacklers, backed up by Sia Khaleesi. Hendrickse managed to spin it back the other way. They went round the backside. Pops the ball off to Lacania Am, who sees him go all the way over for the try line. However, a forward pass did come into this one. It did look forward when I first saw it, and I just sort of thought, now call that back for a forward pass. We did go back to the TMO. It was ruled a forward pass, and I genuinely wasn't actually sure on seeing it on the replay. I think Wales got a little bit lucky with the way the camera angle was. I think it looks forward on the camera angle, absolutely. But if you actually looked at where the 22 line was, it actually looked quite parallel. I think, if anything, if you had the camera in a better angle, it might look incredibly flat, about as flat as you can be. But I'm actually not sure it was definitely 100% forward. So Wales potentially getting a bit lucky with that one, but a second try for South Africa disallowed there. Wales managing to win a penalty at the scrum, and this is where we begin to see the bomb squad come on in that 45-minute. Now, something else that Wales did here, putting on their own replacement forwards at the same time. This was something I said last week that I really wanted to see. I'm not going to claim that Pivac watched my video, but that's what I said. I said, this is the way I think you want to be playing South Africa, putting your own forwards on as soon as that bomb squad come on, try and take that advantage out. On the next attack, Wales managed to get another penalty converted by Dan Biggar. South Africa offside. The South African defence was really quick in this game, getting off the line actually, but this one was just a little bit too quick. Kicked over by Dan Biggar, takes South Africa to 17, Wales at 14 now, pulling it back to 3 points. And at this point, it was looking like actually this game could begin to go other way. The momentum was beginning to shift towards Wales an awful lot now. South Africa looked like they were running out of a few options, potentially looking a little bit tired, waiting for a few of those subs to come on. After a couple more replacements, we eventually get to Khaleesi's try. A really nicely well-worked try. South Africa are on the attack. There were some huge runs from the forwards in this game. Real good carries from the South African forwards in this game, making meters on every single carry. It was really nice to see. Wales on the scramble, but were holding on. They actually weren't conceding too much when in scramble defence, which was nice to see. It all began with Eben Etzebeth having a nice charge down kick. He had a great game for his 100th cap. He'd be really happy with his performance in this game. Eventually, it led to a South Africa penalty. Wales not releasing, so they kicked to the corner, went for that driving maul again. Still didn't manage to get a try from it, so they went back for another penalty. The driving maul stopped again. Wales will be very happy with how little ground South Africa actually made with these driving mauls. South Africa went through the phases, but eventually it pops up to Khaleesi. Hard man to stop from 5 metres out at full sprint. The conversion also went over, so South Africa go in the lead now by 10 points, 24-14. But there's still 25 minutes remaining, so it's all to play for. And to be honest, for the rest of this game now, it begins to turn into an awful lot of Wales attack. They absolutely made the most of this now. South Africa did have a couple of tacks during this next sort of phase or two, but for whatever reason, every time they kept making this really good ground, they were going through the phases, they were making their room up the pitch. They kept going to Pollard, who kept trying to do some very weird kicks, trying to just mix up the attack a little bit, but didn't really amount to anything. Chipping over the top or trying to grab a kick through, but it just really wasn't getting anywhere. After the sort of first 2 times, you should probably try and stop that. It's clearly not going anywhere. We saw at least 3 or 4 of these attempts now, and I really just think they needed to stop kicking the ball away and just hold on to it. The phase play was working well for them, but Wales were making the ground. They managed to get a free kick from South Africa, stepping across at the line out. Wales will be happy with how they held out in that scrum against the Springboks, to be honest. I've got here in the 67th minute, South Africa went on another 2 attacks and kicked the ball away twice on both of them, which is just bizarre. I really think if they'd held onto the ball a bit more, they could have been able to make a bit more from it. Wales had the opportunity to try and close the gap near the 70-minute mark, and they managed to kick up the field through a penalty, started their own driving maul, which South Africa conceded. Another penalty. Wales kick right into that 5-metre. They go for the line-out, but quite a poor line-out from Dewi Lake. Sees the ball go over the top, and South Africa just managed to jump on it and clear the ball quite safely. And there was a couple of those instances where Wales' attack looked like it was actually beginning to come together today, and that final pass or that final set piece you just need to nail, just going wrong for them, just not managing to seal it out. The final attack we really got to see that had a great deal of promise was by Josh Adams just after the 70th minute. Had a nice break just on the far wing. Superb play from Wales, managing to get the extra man on the wing. Superb run down. There was an unbelievable tackle coming in from Mapimpi. Managed to just carve his legs down, and the turnover came in again from Quagga Smith, who had another amazing game in this one. Again, though, Faf de Klerk had come on at this point, and every time they were getting these turnovers, they kept box kicking it away. I'm sure for South African fans, this will be a bit annoying playing for you. Some box kicks are absolutely worth it. They were making good ground. The aerial battle for South Africa in this game was much better than a couple of the other tests we've seen so far, but so many of these box kicks were just handing Wales back possession. Wales did go back on the offensive, but just the defence of South Africa holding up, managed to get another penalty. Wainwright, for being offside there, just eases that pressure on the South African defence, enabling them to kick out. And then from 75 minutes on, we just see South Africa sealing out this game, going back on the offensive under the advantage, going through some carries, making that ground again, eventually just putting a bit of a tired Wales, now so many tackles in this game, just putting them under pressure, and eventually led to a penalty in the 75th minute. Of course, Andre Pollard's going to take the 3 there, just to slow down the tempo, take the time with it, gets that conversion over for 27-14, and then right at the end, South Africa managed to get a really nice jackal penalty from Malcolm Marks just with inside the Wales half, and that allows Pollard to have another kick towards post, which is how we take ourselves to the final score of 30 points to 14. So congratulations to South Africa in being able to win that series. It went pretty much how I thought it was going to go. I actually thought Wales's attack was the best attack in this test we've seen for the whole series. I thought they played so much better. South Africa looked like they had a pretty dominant first half, but in that second half, it began to feel a bit wavery. I actually thought potentially Wales could have mounted this massive comeback again, but South Africa just having the game management to be able to seal it out, taking those penalties at the end is the way to go. Just take the 3 points, slow the game down, it's the way to go. In terms of like tackles and stuff, that was quite an interesting stat. I sort of took it out there about the 60-minute marker, about 3/4 of the way through the game. South Africa had made 64 tackles and Wales had made 110. Now this is quite incredible because the final stat was Wales had the most territory and the most possession in the game, and yet they also had to make the most tackles. That just South Africa making the most of those, the possession they did have and the ventures into the 22, just converting them into points every single time. It's just how you seal out a game. In terms of some final notes, I said, yeah, Wales much better on attack than the last 2 tests. Wales did manage to hold up against the driving maul, which is something I think they'll be really proud of. South Africa are probably one of the harder teams to be able to take on in that driving maul. They conceded 1 try from about 8 driving mauls, so I think that was pretty good going from them. In terms of South Africa, Eben Etzebeth and Malcolm Marks, both brilliant. Again, I think they've been fantastic throughout the whole series so far. So much better in the aerial battle. Yes, South Africa, fantastic under the high ball in this game. We've seen in the last 2 games, they've been trying different kicking tactics in each game so far, but the kick chase hasn't been the best, and even when the kick chase has been relatively good, not really recycling that ball a lot. But in this game, some superb catches in the air, even beating people like Dan Bigger, Liam Williams, they're top quality aerial players, so being able to get the ball back from them, absolutely superb. And then finally, the South African defence pushed Wales back a lot. There was an awful lot of times where Wales had the ball in their hands, but just the speed it was coming out from the back from Kieran Hardy, it was getting to a Wales player at a bit of a standing start, and it just allowed that blitz defence from South Africa to get up every single point. There was one in the sort of 50-minute, I remember just watching it, and there was 4 phases, and Wales easily lost 20 to 30 metres over 4 phases, just from the speed of the South African defence, just targeting the man. Really well worked. It was really well played from South Africa, and to be honest, think they deserved the series. Think it was absolutely brilliantly played by them in this final test. A worthy win. But there we have it, guys. Make sure you do drop down in the comments your thoughts on the game. If you've enjoyed this match report today, remember to leave this video a like, and to keep up to date with all of the latest videos on the channel, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. It's free, it's easy. You can always unsubscribe later if you really hate the content now. Hopefully you don't, and I hope you've all enjoyed today, guys. I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.